Thank you for joining us as Arc of Grace Arbor presents our 2021 IEP and 504 Plan Workshop with special guest presenter Sherry Mashburn from PAVE.
Where to go? I'm going to give 5 minutes to PAVE, and that is that PAVE is a nonprofit organization. We are federally funded from OSEP, which is the Office of Special Education Programs. We have been funded since 1979, and basically that was about 2 years after our law was passed, which was IDEA. So as far as PAVE, that's where our funding is coming from. And there's many projects under PAVE, many projects. And I'm going to talk about PTI, which is the Parent Training and Information part of PAVE. There are 8 of us around the state, and we have a helpline. So if parents have questions or concerns and they want to talk to one of us, we get on, if you want to get on our little computer programs and go to Washington PAVE and then get on the helpline. You can leave your questions there, and then one of the 8 of us will return your calls. And again, hopefully it will be a timely response, but we are just really busy right now, again, with the start of school and all the changes that have happened. So, and our phone number it's a 1-800 number. And it's 1-800-5-PARENT. Isn't that tricky? I love that. And again, then there are 8 of us that will be distributed around the state. We are very lucky to have also a bilingual coordinator. And so for families who speak Spanish, asking for Socorro Trujillo will get you to our bilingual coordinator. And we have other folks in Tacoma that speak Spanish as well. So our main office is in Tacoma. There are 2 of us over here in the Yakima Valley. And then we have someone in Vancouver and someone in Everett. And you're going to have to add Tacoma, obviously. And then someone up the peninsula, right? You have to forgive me. I've lived in Eastern Washington a really long time. And I get to Seattle maybe once a year. And that's the extent of my knowledge. I kind of do know where Vancouver is, but again, forgive me. So we're going to talk tonight a little bit about 504 plans. 504 plans differ than IEPs. And 504 basically is a general education accommodation plan. So for students who have disabilities and certainly may not qualify for an IEP, but would be successful and need the support of accommodations, that would be a 504 plan. And a 504 plan generally in our state is supported by school counselors. So whether they're school counselors in elementary, middle, or high school, if we feel our children need a 504 plan, those are the folks to go to. They are 504 coordinators. Say, for instance, however, you're not terribly thrilled with the 504 coordinator in your building, or you're not getting response, or you're not happy with the plan. Every school district in our state has to have a 504 coordinator. And so those are folks to go to just in case we have questions that, our counselor in our buildings wouldn't be able to provide us with answers. And so that's good to know. There have been several times where parents have needed to go to the building 504 coordinator, or not building, I'm sorry, to the district 504 coordinator to make sure that what's going on is something that we want. Anyone can refer a child for a 504 plan. Usually, though, it comes from either parents or teachers. And, again, the plan itself is unique to the child. If a child has an IEP, they do not need a 504 because all of the accommodations that a child would need should be on an IEP, an individualized educational program. So it's usually one or the other. And again, 504 plans have accommodations. So if a child needs to sit in the front of the room, if a child needs to use a particular pencil, if a child needs to be given extra time for assignments, if they need to take tests in a quiet room, in a smaller group, all of those are accommodations on an IEP or on a 504 plan. Typically, the evaluation that gets a 504 plan is a lot less structured than on an IEP. So I'm going to give you a tip, and this is the tip. Anyone who has a 504 plan, in my opinion, we should make sure that we either email it to individual teachers or the old-fashioned way, print it out, put it in an envelope, and put it in everybody's box that your child has. That way that, general education teachers, if they are part of the accommodation for that child, they need to know it. It's not fair to them if they're responsible for an accommodation. Being excused early to go to the bathroom, for instance, being excused to be able to walk around the hallway, even the hallway. I mean, those are accommodations that teachers need to not understand so that they're not questioning it and the child hasn't an answer. So really that's my tip. I agree with I also think that if a child has an IEP, every single person, well, and it's in the law, every teacher, anyone who works with a child should also have a copy of the IEP, or at least the accommodations.
Question: if a parent requests a new accommodation on their child's IEP, does the district have 30 days to respond?
They do have the 30 days. However, I would hope that folks would get on to your request a lot sooner than that. Okay. One of the things that PAVE is really passionate about is contact and communicate with your school by email, okay, or in writing, because then it is documented. The other thing is, sometimes if we are only emailing teachers or we're only emailing school principals, it might be best to include the special ed director in that email. Special ed directors have the language, they know and they understand timelines. Also, if the change that you want for your child needs to be looked at much sooner than that 30 days. You can email your superintendent. You can certainly use PAVE, any of the other groups that you have contact with. It's all right to CC them as well. I think sometimes taking it outside of the building gets a response, a quicker response. 504 plans can be very effective. And can really help kids, and that's what they're there for. But the other thing that I want to remind all of us is that those babies are ours, right? Those little pumpkins belong to us, and so we need to be sort of the caretakers of those 504 plans. I have a parent today who has, she has a list of accommodations from general ed teachers, and they're not doing them. Those accommodations are not being provided to those students. And that's very, very problematic, because a 504 plan is a legal agreement that certain folks, teachers, general ed teachers, are going to comply with them. If they're not able to comply, then how can we help figure out a plan that can help them? So 504 plans are okay. Sometimes when children come off of IEPs and are no longer eligible for special education, they are put on 504 plans just to help them through that time, which is okay. The only difference between a 504 plan and an IEP is that on an IEP, a student receives specially designed instruction, whether that takes wherever that may take place. That is the only difference. So the accommodations are the same. The need for the child to need the 504 plan or the IEP is the same. And again, then the only difference is specially designed instruction.
Question: if a student has an accommodation to receive specialized instruction for math, but is also receiving math instruction in their general education classroom due to scheduling difficulties, are they required to do the general ed math assignments?
If he's eligible for specially designed instruction in math, and he's getting that in a resource room, or where if he's getting it with a special education teacher, then there has to be some agreement. Maybe there is some work that he can do in the general ed classroom that has to do with math or what they're doing in the math program. The three of you should get together at some point and decide how that's going to happen. Oh, that's easy for me to say, but you really need to talk with them and say, this isn't working. He cannot do the math in fourth grade class. So he can't do the fourth grade math, but he could do something in that general ed classroom. Right. Has to do with math. I'm a big believer in talking to folks, trying to work these things out. It just makes happy people, and we want our children to be happy at school and to be successful. So, and the only, we have to talk to folks and they have to talk to us. So it's equally important that we have this communication back and forth.
Question: who decides if a child will be on an IEP or a 504 plan?
Okay, the way to make that decision is by evaluation. So if I have a child, say, in second grade, and that child's been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, or even, depression or anxiety, or something else by a doctor, or it's just not performing, grades are bad, behavior may be a little iffy, we're really concerned. So we want to make a referral. We talk to our general ed teacher, obviously, and she's concerned as well. And so we make a referral. There are 5 areas to refer a child. Okay, I got to count them. So the first would be cognitive and academic. Cognitive is an IQ. Academics are reading, writing, and math. And there are particular tests that score and give us numbers. Then there's speech, communication, adaptive. Adaptive are more life skills kinds of issues, whether it's toilet training or whether it's being able to, a lot of the other life skills issues are adaptive stuff. And I know this is simplistic, but I'm a simplistic kind of person. Okay, but then there is motor, fine motor, gross motor. Is the child able to hold a pencil? Can they cut? Those kinds of things would be fine motor and gross motor. And also sensory issues as well might be in that area, in motor area. And then I said speech. Social emotional is a biggie these days, because many of our children have behavior issues going on at school, whether on the playground or in the classroom or in the lunchroom. And so a social emotional is another area to be evaluated. And I'm running through my head, what have I missed? So there's cognitive, and that's an IQ. And believe it or not, it's kind of interesting to know what your child's IQ is. regardless, it's kind of interesting. And then again, academic, reading, writing, math, academic, adaptive, speech and fine motor, and social emotional. So those are the areas that you refer to a school psychologist. I am really encouraging you, if you're going to refer your children for special education or for that testing, make sure you go to your school psychologist. They understand, because they're the ones that are going to do the testing for the most part. And they're the ones that are qualified to do it. So they perform, if you make that referral, they have 25 school days, which is quite a bit, to determine with the group whether they're going to test or not test. Then after that period of time, if they decide to test, they have an additional 35 school days to complete that testing and determine if the child is eligible for special education services or not. If they're not eligible, or if they're not determined to be eligible, parents can go ahead and get their own testing at their own expense. So that's sort of how you determine whether a child is eligible for special ed services or not. So a child might qualify for cognitive skills or reading, writing, and math, but wouldn't qualify for speech and fine motor. And we parents, we don't know what we don't know. And so many times we go into IEP meetings and folks are using lots of acronyms, or they're using test scores, and there are things that we totally just don't understand. And I will tell you that for many of us, it's a very overwhelming experience. I bet when my son was in school, folks might have talked to me, 20 times about his cognitive levels, and I'd nod and say, oh yeah, cognitive, yeah, I got it. And I'd go home and, for 10 years would look up cognitive because I didn't know what it meant. Speech therapy, and some of the goals and objectives, occupational and physical therapy, some of the goals and objectives are just things we don't understand. And we are very reluctant, especially I was in my case, I didn't want to appear stupid. So I wouldn't ask questions. And I really, really encourage you to ask the questions. If you're not happy or you don't understand what's being written down, there is nothing wrong with asking it to be rewritten in my language, and that's okay. I have a language. Yeah, I do. And it's okay to ask for folks, please explain. Talking about IEPs, so our little pumpkins have been evaluated and now they're eligible for an IEP. And what does that mean? IEPs, again, are very confusing. They can be very confusing, and the things that are written on them can be very confusing. I will tell you, there are WAC codes all over the place. If you go to OSPI's website, you can look up WAC codes for special education, and they're quite interesting. And if we want to know what our children's rights are and what our rights are as parents, it's okay to go and look, because they're pretty. Anyway, I use them all the time. Or you can call us and we'll talk about it and what the little WAC codes mean. If our children are receiving services for the first time, it's an initial evaluation. We have to sign consent. If we don't sign consent, then our children don't participate. They will not have an IEP, and that's okay, one way or the other. It's just that it is required to sign IEPs for the first time. Anytime our children the request to be evaluated, we have to sign consent. It can't just be done without our consent, because again, there are babies, and what happens in first grade may stay with the first grade teacher, but by the time that child's in fifth grade or seventh grade, things change. So at any rate, I will tell you that if, for instance, you have an IEP meeting scheduled, teacher calls you today and says, we have an IEP meeting Monday. It's scheduled, everybody's coming. You know, can you be there? And you're thinking, I'm going to be a little sarcastic here, but I'm scheduled for surgery on Monday. I can't come. And so the teacher says, not to worry. You go ahead and have your little surgery. We'll have our little IEP meeting, and then we'll let you know what happens. I am here to tell you, I love saying this, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said to us, if a parent is not able to participate in an IEP meeting, then you don't have an IEP meeting. If, for instance, the date is, you know, their IEPs are written year by year. So if an IEP is written October 28th, next year it has to be written before October 28th, right? However, if a parent isn't able to attend on October 28th, the parent needs to be responsible and write an email or somehow communicate and document that they are not able to attend, but they have every intention of participating. That's a really important part of it. Is I have every intention of attending, but I'm having this little surgery on this date. Let's give us another date, and we'll do that. Nobody's going to, and then districts sometimes say to us, well, the state's going to come down and ding us, or we have to have this. It's the law. The law is that parent participation trumps the date. That's the way it is. Many districts don't know that. Anyway, they don't know that. So if districts go ahead and have that IEP meeting without us, even though we told them we intend to participate, it's a non-IEP. It's just doesn't happen. So it's important that we parents be participants in our children's IEPs, obviously. It's their life and it's how they're learning.
Question: how often are the evaluations done by the psychologist?
At least once every 3 years, at least. Now, for instance, if there were a change or there's, again, new medication or new behaviors or new concerns, testing can be done more often than that. But it has to be once every 3 years. Mm-hmm.
I do have a quick question or maybe a comment. You talked about the different ways that a child can qualify for an IEP. And isn't it true that those kind of developmental delays that our kids are qualified under, especially if they start in preschool, that kind of ends at the age of 9? And then there has to be some other kind of a diagnosis other than developmental delay for that
Right.
IEP to continue? Okay.
There are 14 areas to qualify, 14 qualifying areas, and developmental delay is one of them. So from the age of 3 in preschool until the age of 9, districts can decide to go ahead with that qualifying conditions, that it would be developmentally disabled. On the other hand, at the age of 5, they can do new testing at the age of actually 5 or 6 and put our children into a different category. The category itself is funding. It's not necessarily anything to do with us. I know that sounds ridiculous, but nevertheless, and also, but it's true. We want it to be descriptive, obviously, and if there's diagnosis, whether it's cerebral palsy, whether it's learning disabilities, whether it is autism. Those are categories that rightfully so should be describing what where our children are. So yeah, from 3 to 9. But again, it's sort of at the discretion of the district. I think we parents could certainly have a discussion about it. There is a little person that has a diagnosis of autism. The district itself decided that the child only had a speech and communication disorder. That was put onto the IEP, and that parent is not happy. And for many reasons, but that's one of them. So
are there any others, Sherry, that end at the age of 9, or is that only developmental delay?
Developmental delay is the only one.
Okay.
So everything else is put into a category, whatever that category would be. So a child of 6 can be put into the category of autism or orthopedic disabilities or learning disabilities. It just depends on what the testing says and what the diagnosis might be.
Okay. Thank you.
One of the things, whether, about IEPs, it's really important for us, is we send our children to school, and I don't care who they are or what, gifted, having disabilities in a general ed classroom. We send them there for many reasons. I didn't want to homeschool, but I sent them there also because I wanted them to learn, right? That's what we do. We send our children to school to learn. One of the only ways that we have as parents of children with special needs to know if our children are making progress are looking at goals and objectives. And one of the things that we don't do very well, and I'm not talking about parents, just all of us, is write goals that are measurable. If we are looking at a goal, a reading goal, and it says, he's going to go from this level to this level over 3 different occasions, that pretty much is measurable. You can see it happening, and a teacher can measure it over time that this child has made progress in this particular area, whether it's reading, math, doesn't matter. However, I cannot tell you the number of times that I've looked at IEP goals and they are not measurable. And we cannot tell if our children are making progress. And that is not all right. So we have to pay attention to that. The other thing is that progress monitoring, I don't know if you've all heard of progress monitoring, but progress monitoring is the report that is sent home, typically at report card time. So it doesn't matter if you've got quarters or trimesters or semesters, those reports have to be sent home. So for instance, if there is a math goal, our children are in a resource room or wherever they are for math, and the goal is that they will be able to, I don't know, I'm not good with goals, but if they are able to count from 1 to 20, and it's been over a period of 9 weeks, and so it's from and to over a period of 3 or 4 opportunities, right? Whether it's teacher observation, working with the child, whatever. And they're saying that, they've been practicing this and haven't made much progress, not meeting the goal, but we don't have any numbers for that. So have they gotten in 9 weeks, have they made the progress from 1 to 5? They can count from 1 to 5, or they can count to 1 to 15. They're closer to meeting the goal. But it needs to be exactly that. If the goal is the goal, then reporting the goal, this sounds very confusing, has to be in the same language, only the numbers have to be either the same, more so that our children have made progress, or less so we see that our children have regressed. Staying at the same level is a regression, right? Yes, it is. So ladies and gentlemen, if there are any gentlemen, please, please pay attention to goals. And if you can't see your child doing it, then it needs to be more clear for that goal. And we are just about receiving report cards, and we are just about at the point where we should be receiving progress monitoring. For every goal, there should be progress monitoring, every single one. Present levels of performance is really important too. And also the parent reporting, there's a part of the IEP in the very beginning that talks about parent concerns. And we need to make sure that we add those. We talk about what our concerns are and we add them to the IEP. Because sometimes, we neglect that part. So a nice little description, that she's just cute as a little bug's ear, and that she does really well at home, or she does well with her little friends. I mean, whatever we want, that's important for the school to know. And so then how is it going to be provided in the IEP? And it can, like, accommodations, maybe a little plan with the teacher and the nurse, however that works. So, and one of the other things is, if people aren't listening to us, that's not okay. This is, they're professionals. These are our children. And I have certain expectations. And so if people aren't listening to us, and I had several families today, the folks at school in schools, we're not getting back to them in a timely way or any other way. They were just not doing it. Yeah. And so I have encouraged them to say that, I need a response from you. And if I don't receive a timely response, then I will choose other options.
Yeah.
And so, you're not talking about what those options are.
Mm-hmm.
Could be bringing cookies, I mean, possible. I don't, but possible. And so, or there would be other options, and we have other options. And I'll just throw this out there. Mediation is wonderful. I don't know if any of you have experienced mediation with Sound Options, but it's where districts get together. It's free to parents and it's free to districts. And everybody gets together, signs a little mediation agreement. It's very confidential. At the end, hopefully, and I think they have like a 98% success rate, but you have a mediation agreement, which is good and solid, and hopefully will be followed by the folks. So it's another option. The state gives us the option to file complaints, and we have that option as well. PAVE, as we are available, we can go to IEP meetings with families. We're doing a lot of Zoom work, but we can go to IEP meetings or to mediation with families as time allows. And that's because there are only 8 of us. And some of those are folks that work part-time. So.
Great. Do you guys work at all with the education ombuds?
We do.
You do?
I'm in love with Rose.
They're wonderful over there. Do you want to kind of tell everybody a little just what they are and how you guys work with them?
Sure. The Education Ombudsman is not out of OSPI. They are an independent group, and they are out of the governor's office, and they're funded out of the governor's office. And they do much the same thing that we do. I don't think they are going to meetings with families right now, and all of us are understaffed. I mean, it just is what it is. But they do come to meetings with families, in Zoom meetings, and they do lots of presentations, and they talk about the law and about rights for everybody. And we work very closely with them. So I've been in the same meeting with Rose. We've been together, and that's a lot of fun. So, and again, she is very She's just really good at what she does. You know, she's very tactful. She works well with schools and with parents, and that's important. So they are wonderful. They are.
Yeah. So speaking of Zoom and kind of the this one of the many changes that we've had during this pandemic, right? We're hearing some about families who need recovery services, IEP recovery services. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and what families can expect with that?
Sure. Everybody during the pandemic, or when we were all, everybody was online, and families, and when we first went back to school, and many children weren't able to wear a mask, and there was a lot of confusion about that, and a lot of children were being asked to stay home. In fact, that's still going on if children aren't able to wear a mask at school. And so there is some confusion about that. And it's confusing for schools, it's confusing for us. Recovery services are sort of like very similar to compensatory services. So if a student has lost, if there's been regression, or for instance, they were going to do speech therapy online, and the student was totally not able to do it that way. That's the time to start talking about recovery services. And I'm not sure that many districts are really clear about recovery services, but they're out there, and there is funding for it. And there is, if you get on OSPI's website and put in, search for recovery services, they've got lots and lots of information, specific information about recovery. Compensatory is just slightly different. For instance, if my child is available at school and the speech therapist is out for a month, that's compensatory. I love that word. It's compensatory time. Because my child was available for the service and the service was not provided. So, and then of course ESY, which is, I always call it ESY. Anyway, it is ESY. And sometimes when children have not been provided services, that also is something that, or have not made progress, that is something that's provided as well. So
those compensatory and all of and the recovery services are hour to hour, right? So if you say you had 30 minutes twice a week for a child to do speech therapy and no speech therapy was given for 4 weeks, they would owe you 4 hours.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'd be counting the seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And then you want to be reasonable. You don't want that child to get 100 minutes a week during this,
right.
or during spring break or whatever. So you want to be kind of obviously thoughtful about how it's going to be provided. And remember that even when our school districts are telling us no, it's just opening the conversation. Right, Christy? Just opens the conversation. Because, again, we can either file complaints, or we can have another meeting, or we can talk about it, and hopefully that will provide support for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for touching on that. I know that's been a topic that's come up for families that I've worked with. So
I know we're at 7:03, but I one more little moment. Many of our children are going into general education, and we're calling it inclusion. And I understand all about inclusion. When we first started all of this, we were just glad and happy that our children were in a school building, even though it was far, far away from the office. We were still really glad they were there. And then we got a little more inclusive, and we wanted our children to be included. Now, of course, in the year 2021, inclusion is an important issue for many, many reasons for our children, but it's not the only issue. And so I just encourage everyone to, if our little guys are in an inclusion program and it's working for them, hallelujah. However, if a little teacher in a kindergarten program, she's got 20 kids and 5 of them have IEPs, how is our baby going to get the service and the time with that teacher that he may need? So it's, and we all know there are no paras these days. I don't know where they went. They all went to Bermuda, okay? Because there are none in Washington State. And we are really having a hard time with special ed teachers too, as well. Check that out. You know, we need to know where our children are and who's teaching them. And there's one district that I'm aware of that is taking paras off of IEPs without parent knowledge. Just be aware. It's just, we just need to be aware. This service matrix page gives you all the information you need. How many minutes is your child getting math? Who's actually teaching the child math? Is it in all of it in the general ed classroom? Is it the para doing it? Is it only being monitored by special education? I mean, those things are really important for us to know. And maybe we're going to be okay with that, and maybe we're not. So, pay attention, ladies and gentlemen, to the matrix page. It's really, really important. Who, what, where, when, and why.
Thank you for joining us for this workshop on IEP and 504 plans with Sherry Mashburn from PAVE. If you have any questions, please contact us at the ARC at 360-537-7000. Thank you.